I'm leveling up the E36 from budget to mid-range setup, and I thought I would do a bit of a comparison between them, a technical comparison, so you can see what the difference is and why the mid-range one is worth a bit of extra money. So to start with, it'll be the angle adapters, the cheap eBay angle blocks and eBay tie rods, versus the PMC Stage 3 adapter and tie rod. Now, immediately you can see the first difference is that that one's filthy because it's been on the car for a while, and this one's clean because I'm only just fitting it up now. Second difference is that with this one, that is your control arm mount, and that goes onto where the tie rod would on the knuckle normally. So what all that does is it triangulates that and puts a third point for the tie rod to actually go to. Now that just gives it more lock. It does reduce the Ackerman slightly, but not to zero. All it does is give you more lock. There's no more camber or anything like that out of it. Now the PMC one, you can note, has quite a large difference, that the actual control arm point is moved. So old control arm and tie rod onto the knuckle, and that's where the control arm actually bolts up to and where the tie rod is. So it's shortening that distance as well, which is actually about the same between them. So the lock increase should be fairly similar, but this one will give you more negative camber, as instead of the knuckle bolting there on the control arm like it is with that one, it bolts straight through, it moves the knuckle out, which tilts your wheel over, giving you a bit more negative camber. Second point of note that I find really good is the bump steer adjustment on the tie rod. Now this part is actually quite important if you're pretty low. Note that this one is just tie rod bolts onto the knuckle, it's pretty simple. But this one, you can actually flip that, see the plastic spacer there, small distance, large distance, you can flip that over for more or less bump steer correction, which I think is a fantastic idea because my car is quite low, so it is pretty required. Hang on, I'll just try and undo that. Okay, I got it apart so you can see the difference. The tapered part obviously sits into where the tie rod has to, because that's what that taper actually seats in as. But this part, you can see how they're different heights. That will move where the tie rod attaches, depending on if you have the large one or the small one. Now obviously the eBay one doesn't have any of that, so your bump steer, that's what you have. But this one's adjustable, which I really like. Now third difference is the actual tie rod itself. With these ones, the original style wavy design, I like them because if I hit a curb, it will bend at one of those points and won't bend the rack end and shouldn't harm the knuckle. Now in practice these do break because they're usually pretty garbage quality. This one however is big and just straight tube, no bends. That's however good because I found that with this, the tie rod is so close to where the control arm is that you can see there's bind marks there where it's been rubbing on the control arm. So as I came into full lock, this would sit against the control arm and bind at full lock, which was quite scary when you're trying to turn back. This one won't have that issue because there's no bends to hit the control arm. Now, the actual bearing in it is a proper rose joint kind of thing, whereas that one's OEM. Difference is though, you get those for like 40 bucks off eBay, so if you bend one, you just chuck in another, it doesn't matter. These are a little more expensive. In a crash, it should just break through there. The actual sleeve should be totally unharmed. But that's a basic analysis of why the PMC kit really is just worth the money. Like, you do just get what you pay for between them. You look at the quality as well, like that's been properly CNC machined out of, I assume, billet. That one's just like trying to pop metal cast out sort of thing. And they also flog out real quick, especially the eBay rack ends and tie rods. I didn't go for the full SLR kit with the fabricated control arms or anyone else's fabricated control arms because I don't want to bend one. Here in Australia, if you crash and bend a control arm, you can't get another one for like a month or 2 months sort of thing, and they're pretty expensive. Whereas this one, I just use E36 arms. They're a straight replace. You pick them up for like 80 bucks off eBay each, with 100 bucks for a pair. You can find them anywhere in the wreckers. So what we have here are the base model Maxpeedingrods or pleasure rods or PP rods. depending on who you ask. They came fitted in my car. I've done 3 track days on them. I don't know what their life was like before, how old they are. Comparing to BC BR, this one is extreme low edition and custom rated to, I think, 8 kilos in the front I went with. So, differences. Now, the issues that pleasure rods usually have, as you can see where that bolt hole is, that's all stretched out. A couple of crashes, that just tears straight out. The BCs, you can see the webbing is much thicker in that distance. It's also much thicker on the ends compared to the pleasure rods. The tearing doesn't happen on BCs, at least I haven't seen it happen on BCs. This one being the extreme low, the actual body of it is at quite a different height. The threads, much the same. Adjustment collars, much the same. The spring itself is a tiny bit, well, it appears to be a tiny bit longer on the BC, but I don't know how much preload is on them in that, probably a fair amount. This one will ride much better because the damper inside of it is actually well constructed and not just made of hopes and dreams like these ones. This one is also non-adjustable in terms of compression, although the compression adjustment with them is usually just like an all-over adjustment. You just turn it and things happen. This one is properly adjustable. It's only one way, really. It doesn't have separate compression and rebound, but I don't really mind because I don't need it so much. The top hat design is vastly different. That one has quality bearings that will hold up to abuse. This one, as you can see, just kind of flops around a bit. It's pretty haggard. Poorly constructed rose joints, or however you want to call that, don't last long at all. If they're poorly constructed, properly made ones like that will last a long time. The actual top hat of it is relatively similar. They both look pretty much the same in that regard, although the adjustment slot in that is a fair bit larger, because this one you can't actually go very far without the top hat crashing into the back end of it there. So yeah, they're just, I mean, they really, like them for $300 or whatever they're worth new, not bad. If $300 is all you can get and you just want it to be stiff for a drift car, great, have that. Be careful about the threads. It will eventually rip through. You're just going to have to deal with it when it does. With that said, these are definitely worth the money. Riding in these, even with stiff spring rates, is still like butter smooth compared to pleasure rods, even at their softest. There are adjustable ones of these that you can get. Apparently the non-adjustable ones, so these are the adjustable ones, but just always set on full hard. The adjustable ones on soft, set up correctly, they might not break your back over bumps, but it's not very pleasant. So it's definitely worth the money if you're doing a street car, or if you just want like a adequate level comp car that you don't have to care about, like thinking about, oh, is it going to tear when I hit that curb sort of thing. Like, these are just going to work. The other good part about BCs is that you can buy spare parts. They're readily available. If I cook a damper or smash it into a curb really bad and break something, I can just get the parts. With pleasure rods, you just buy a whole new set. You can't buy individual stuff for them. So that's something to think about as well. With the pleasure rods, you cannot spec spring rates. I'm not sure what the spring rates are, but you can't change them. Like, it is what it is. I don't know of any other spring that sits in that spot and will actually work. So your spring rate's your spring rate. You can't change. Whereas that, you can spec whatever you want. You can get extreme low, which I've got. You can get regular height. Whatever rate of spring you want, they can do. Which is definitely worth getting, because it doesn't cost any extra. Those were $1,500 out the door for the set of 4 custom rates, extreme low, which pretty good. That's done with the technical part. I'll throw them in the car and we'll have a look how it sits then. Okay, so I got it fitted up temporarily. I have the wrong rack ends, so this is not a true indication of how much lock it'll have, because the toe will change. Because I had E36 control arms and I had the angle blocks, I was running E90 rack ends because they need the extra length, but it's no longer required because the tie rods that come with the PMC kit are longer, so I can run standard E36 rack ends, but I haven't done that yet, so I still have to purchase them. But it gives you a good idea roughly how much lock it's going to have. This side will increase a little bit once it's got the right rack ends in it. So yes, it is quite substantial. Obviously it's nowhere near as much as the proper SLR kit or the Wisefab kits, because the wheels go completely sideways on them, but it gives you a good idea. Now you can see on this the proximity from the tie rod to the control arm. Like, I can barely even fit my finger in there. That's what I mean with the original wavy type of tie rods, that they were sitting on the control arm. You can see the rub mark there on it as well. It'll hold up for competitions, things like that. It'll outdrive me for a very long time, I would think. One thing to note, I have currently got 16-inch wheels on it. Nut for the bottom of the tie rod would hit the wheel if I was not running spacers so large. I've currently got a 30mm bolt-on spacer to sit it out like that. If I was running less, then that would probably contact if I just put the wheel on. I think it would hit. In terms of camber, I will crank the wheel around and see how much there is. I did make, you can kind of see them on the inside there. I made some spaces to space the bottom of the strut out that way. Well, space the nut so it comes out at more of an angle to gain camber. So there is a lot, but there is also quite a camber gain from the E36 arms and also the PMC kit, because as previously mentioned, that's where the LCA bolt is bolted up to. That's not the correct nut, I will change that. And that's the bottom of the knuckle, so it moves the knuckle out a bit from that. The control arm moves the knuckle out a bit as well. My spacer moves that out even further, so it is cambered out more than it will be. As you can see, at full lock, the tyre is only slightly rolling over, which is pretty much perfect, as I was told that the goal is at 3/4 of steering angle for the tyre to be sitting perfectly flat. Now that's at full lock and it's only just over, so it should be pretty much perfect. So with the wheel straight, that is a vertical view from the front. That's quite a significant amount of camber. And from the back, it's not outrageous. Like, it won't flog your tyres out in 100 k's of driving, but I would not put that on a daily driver. Although, with that said, if this was a daily driver, I would keep E36 control arms on it, and I would not have spaced the bottom of the strut out so as to reduce that camber a little bit. And on another note of camber, I rotated my strut tops so that they are mostly doing caster. These cars suffer chronically from lack of caster, so I'm trying to gain every little bit that I can for the self steer. So yeah, I've rotated them, as you can see, so the strut is pushing back further. More strut angle means more caster, which is what I want. The reason why I did not do a comparison on the rears is that I was not using a complete Maxpeedingrod rear setup. I was using an OEM replacement shock with Maxpeedingrod spring. Now the Maxpeedingrod's rear shock is much the same as the fronts. There's an adjustable one, there's a non-adjustable one. Both are different flavours of not very good. Yeah, the Maxpeedingrods blow out top mounts and things like that. So, but yes, I was using this because this is what came in the car and I didn't want to buy more Maxpeedingrods only to swap them out for BCs. The springs themselves, again as in the front, you can't spec custom rates. They are what they are. You can't choose it. They don't ride great, but it does what it says on the tin. Now, for a final assessment, is it worth it to go with the proper PMC stuff for the angle kit over the eBay angle blocks? I would say yes, certainly. The extra features, the extra strength, the actual engineering into it, yes, definitely worth it. Look how much camber there is on that bad boy, and you saw how much angle that it could get. I personally, if I was doing it again, I would not even bother with the eBay angle blocks at all. Stock angle is good to learn on to start with. If you're out driving stock angle, put the PMC kit in or a similar mini kit like that. Don't bother with the eBay ones because they just aren't that good. In terms of coilovers, is it worth it to put BCs in? Yes, if your budget extends that much. Now the Maxpeedingrods you can be had for $250 or $300. If that's all your budget extends to, then get them, but the BCs are definitely worth the money. Maxpeedingrods will be fine for a complete budget build. If all you want to do is get out and track and have fun, then go for that, because that's what I did for a few track days and it was fantastic. Do not expect them to perform like good coilovers. Do not expect them to be reliable. Do not expect them to last for a long time. But $300 for Maxpeedingrods versus $1,500 for the set of BCs. If all you want to do is crash into your friends, then Maxpeedingrods will do you fine.